Example 2 of Quadratic Applications. The Apollo's chariot, a roller coaster at Busch Gardens, moves at 110 feet per second. The function of the ride can be represented by this equation. So what is the maximum height reached by this ride? Okay, whenever we are looking for the maximum height, that is whenever we had to find the axis of symmetry first, and then we plugged it back in and found the height. So one thing I do want to go ahead and do is rewrite this equation with y and x, because it's fine if you want to do that. So y equals negative 16 x squared plus 101x plus 10. And what you need to know is what the x and the y values are actually talking about. The y value is talking about height, so the height of the roller coaster. The x values are talking about time, so how long it took. Okay, so since the question was the actual what is the maximum height, the very first step that we are going to do is step 1, find the axis of symmetry. And the axis of symmetry equation is x equals negative b divided by 2a. So anytime I have an a or a b, I'm going to replace it with a set of parentheses. So negative b divided by 2 times my a value. Well, now let's go over here and figure out what our a, b, and c values are. It does start off as y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, which lets me know that my a value is negative 16. It's the number in front of my x squared. My b value comes next. That one is the one that's attached to the regular x, 101. And this time on example 2, we do actually have a number at the end without a letter attached to it, a constant. It is 10. So let's plug those values in. My b value is 101, and my a value is negative 16. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and simplify this a little bit. I have negative sign on the outside of 101. Well, that just means negative 101. And on the bottom, I know we've done this multiple times, but multiply 2 times negative 16 to get negative 32. Okay, so now we're at the spot where we need to divide. So if I have negative 101 divided by negative 32, double negatives are going to make this a positive answer. So I got 3.15625. So this is approximately, or it is equal to, 3.15625. Now I would like for you to go ahead and reduce your answer, round to the nearest tenths place. So if you were going to round this question, I put the little wavy equal signs because we're rounding, it would be 3 point something. It's either going to be 3.1 or 3.2. That depends on the number that comes right after it. If that number right after it is 5 or higher, then this number goes up. So that means that we actually have 3.2, and don't forget, we are talking about seconds. Okay, so that means that after 3.2 seconds, the roller coaster has reached its maximum height. So now we need to figure out what that actual maximum height is. So I'm going to come over here for step 2. We're going to find the height. And the height is y equals negative 16 x squared plus 101 x plus 10. So all I did right there to find the height, because remember height is the y value right there, I just took that original equation. And I like using x and y, so that's why I'm using it like that instead of h and t. So if I'm plugging something in, it goes negative 16, then x squared plus 101 x, oops, not x, parentheses. Let me fix that. So instead of an x, I'm going to put a set of parentheses, and then I have my plus 10. Okay. So when I start plugging numbers in, my x value that we just found right up here was 3.2. I'm going to put 3.2 here, here, and that's it. Now on the last video I showed you how to do this by hand, which I'm going to show you how to do again, But if you are lucky enough to have the calculator, you can actually type the whole thing in one step and then hit enter and have your answer. But I'm going to show you step by step because I know a lot of you do not have calculators. So here's what you would do. You would do 3.2, and I actually need to make sure that I put that in parentheses. 3.2 squared, that gives me this. And then I need to multiply that times negative 16, which is negative 163.84. So that's what I got when I fixed that first term. The next part is 101 times 3.2, which is positive 323.2. And then at the very end, I can bring down my plus 10. So now I have my y equals, this is talking about the height, I can add up all of my numbers. So let's say we've got negative 163.84 plus 323.2 plus 10, which is 169.36. And if I go back and find the one where I typed it all in, it is the exact same thing, 169.36. Now for this one, we also need to round to the nearest tenths place. Okay. So what that means, I'm going to leave the 169 as it is. But what we're trying to do is figure out if we need to put a 3 here or a 4. That depends on the number right after it. If that number is 5 or higher, then this number goes up. So it is going to be 169.4. And remember, this is a y value, which is talking about the height. So we are talking about height, and it looks like on this problem, it is feet. So feet. When you are entering your answers onto Canvas, do not worry about having to put the labels with it. I only care about the numbers. Okay, last example, number 3. A soccer ball is kicked up from the ground with an initial upward velocity of 90 feet per second. The function h of t equals negative 16t squared plus 90t gives the height of the ball after t seconds. So the actual question on this one was how many seconds will it take for the ball to reach the ground? So remember, whenever you're doing that, if you're trying to find out how long it would take for it to reach the ground, that means it went up and it went back down. So you are looking for the x-intercepts. Okay, so in order to find the x-intercepts, so 1, we're going to find x-intercepts with quadratic formula. And quadratic formula is this. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. This entire thing divided by 2a. And now that I have that written out, I'm going to go ahead and replace every single letter with a set of parentheses. So negative my b value, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. This entire thing divided by 2 times a. Okay. Now, in order to actually plug in our quadratic formula, we need to know what the a, b, and c values are. So if you want to, you can come over here, and I'm just going to rewrite it as y is equal to negative 16x squared plus 90x. And I like to write the ax squared underneath it. So y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so that's going to help us find our x values, our a, b, and c values, excuse me. A is the number in front of the x squared, so negative 16. My b is the number in front of the regular x, that's 90. And since we do not have a constant this time, that means that our c value is 0. So what we are going to do is plug that in. B goes right here, that's 90 and 90. Put b's in both of those places. Then it goes for a, so my a value is negative 16 times my c value, which is 0. And on the bottom, 2 times a, negative 16. Okay, so now in my next step, I need to simplify some of this. Okay. When you have one negative sign in front of your parentheses, that means it just becomes negative 90. It's whenever you have something like this, like if I had negative 7, that's whenever it would turn into a positive. But it would have to have 2 of them to become a positive. Okay, it's plus or minus the square root of 90 squared. Okay, so let's go ahead and figure out what that is. 90 squared, oops, try that again, 8100. So I've got 8100. And then from here, if I multiply negative 4 times negative 16 times 0, that is going to be 0. So I could put plus 0 right here, but that might add an extra step, so I'm just going to leave it out. And when I multiply 2 and negative 16, that is negative 32. Now, at this point, you could go ahead and separate this into the 2 problems if you would like to, but we do have a perfect square, so you could actually add this in. Okay. I've got the square root of 8100. That is a perfect square because when I took the square root, I did not get any decimals. Square root of 7 is an imperfect square because when you take the square root, it does give you decimals. Okay. So we did 8100, which we said was 90. So what this problem actually is negative 90 plus or minus 90 over negative 32. Okay, so if you do the step where you take the square root and change it to a whole number like that, 90, make sure that you drop the square root sign when you do that. So now I'm going to break this problem apart into the 2 problems with that plus or minus sign. So the first one, negative 90 plus 90, all divided by negative 32. For the second one that we're breaking apart, that would be negative 90 minus 90 divided by negative 32. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here and simplify. Now I know whenever I combine these two, negative 90 plus 90, that is going to give me 0. So I've got a 0 on the top part of my fraction right there over negative 32. Which is just going to end up being 0. Now on the other one, I'm doing negative 90 minus 90, which gives me negative 180 over the negative 32. And now I need to divide, which gives me 5.625. Now, we do also want to round this one to the nearest the nearest tenths place, not hundredths. So I'm going to put my wavy line because I am going to round now. It's still going to be 5 point something, but we have to figure out if this is going to be 6 or change to 7. Since the number right after it is below 5, then that means we leave this in alone, and it's 5.6. Now, our answers were 0 and 5.6. That just means if you had this axis, you started at 0, it went up into the air, and then it came back down after 5.6 seconds. So we are going to say 5.6, or it's approximately because we rounded, seconds. When you enter your answers onto Canvas, do not worry about trying to put the labels like seconds.